Hello, innovators, entrepreneurs, and risk takers. Welcome to another episode of Web3 with Sam Kamani podcast. I'm your host, Sam Kamani. And today on this episode, I am interviewing Marc from Algorand. And today he's going to share with us about their vision, their roadmap, and how they intend to get to mainstream adoption of Algorand as well as blockchain and Web3. He is going to also share insights from his time at Google and Android on how they did things, what helped them get to mainstream adoption, as well as what we can learn from that industry or from his competitors, as well as what they're doing things right. So, if you are a founder, if you work in tech, and you are interested in growth and innovation, then this podcast episode is for you. And as always, nothing that we talk about in this podcast episode should be taken as investment advice. And please leave a review and share this on your social media. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. So, Marc, welcome to the show. Looking forward to interviewing you and having another conversation with Algorand team in a way. And last time was also so much fun. Got to learn so much, and I'm sure the audience also got to learn so much. So let's get started. I always ask, I like starting with this, and that is, how did you get involved in all things Web3, blockchain, crypto?
Hi, Sam. First of all, thanks for having me. So excited to be here with you. I've been involved in crypto from the sidelines, I must say, since about 2017, 2018. I remember I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I went to the first blockchain week that was organized.
I also went there. I remember the ICO boom of 2017-18 and the CryptoKitties era.
It was very interesting. And Vitalik was one of the speakers. And I remember I didn't know anything about the crypto space. I was just curious about it. And I still remember Vitalik walking into the room and everybody looking at him as if he was a god entering the room. And it was super interesting. Then he started talking and I couldn't understand a word of what he was saying. But it piqued my curiosity. And so I was super interested in the space. And so I've been following the space. I made some investments here and there. And then finally, like a year and a half ago, the opportunity came with Algorand to join a Layer-1 and become the head of marketing. And I couldn't say no to that. And I've been here ever since.
Oh, fantastic. Pretty much everyone that listens to this podcast is very familiar with Algorand. I've covered Algorand in past as well, probably about a year ago or so. So my next question is around what problem is Algorand solving in 2025 that it wasn't addressing 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, for the people that may not know, Algorand was founded 6 years ago. And the whole idea behind the setup of Algorand was that a trilemma was not a real problem. And so the whole idea that you couldn't be secure, decentralized, and scalable at the same time, like we said, no, it is possible to do that. And so Algorand developed this new consensus mechanism based around the concept of verifiable random functions that made it possible to build a blockchain that is scalable, decentralized, and secure at the same time. And since that moment, Algorand was always focused on achieving real-world scale and being focused on real-world use cases around tokenization, around payments. And that's what we're known for. So we've been around for 6 years. We can do 10,000 transactions per second. We have never been down, not a single second over those 6 years. We have this thing called instant finality, for which we are well known. So unlike other blockchains that can fork, right? And where you have to wait minutes for a transaction to be finalized, this is not the case on Algorand. Every single transaction that's entered into a block is instantly final. And so we have this super robust infrastructure that is really designed for real world scale. And so it feels now, with everything that's happening in the US, with the new regulations, with more clarity coming and more openness towards innovation, the moment has come to really push on the gas pedal and just accelerate. And that's what we're trying to do.
Fantastic. I was just recently reading the 4-step roadmap for Algorand. Can you quickly or briefly explain what are the 4 key steps? And so then we can go more into that.
Yeah, so we're super excited about this. We launched our revised roadmap now 2 weeks ago, and it's really focused around 4 pillars. The first pillar is Web3 core values. We are an OG chain. We've been around, as I said, for 6 years. We still believe in the original kind of Web3 core values around decentralization, around governance, around like economic sustainability. That's still a core part of who we feel we are. And when you look at some of the more recent chains that got started, they talk very little about these kind of core values. We still think they're very important. We're the people's chain. Anybody can run a node. You don't need millions of dollars to run a node. You don't need massive computers to run a node. You can just like power up a mini PC and stake 5 algo, and you're up on the races, and you can run a node, then you can start proposing blocks. That concept of decentralization and censorship resistance, where you can just do this from your home, that's the ultimate kind of decentralized ethos. And so we still believe in this. And so that's the first pillar of our roadmap. We want to keep making progress on these things. So the second pillar is all around mainstream adoption. What can we do to remove friction, to remove complexity for users, for developers, and for businesses? There's still way too much complexity out there. And so every single time we find some friction, we want to kill it. And so the second piece of the roadmap is focused on that. The third piece of the roadmap is focused on specific use cases. We're a general purpose blockchain. Any developer can just come and build a great business on top of Algorand. But there's a few use cases that we think are really massive opportunities whose time has come. And so this specifically around tokenization, around payments, and around identity. And so we have specific action items around that. And then the last point is like the bleeding edge, right? What are we doing from a research perspective? How can we keep pushing the envelope in terms of like privacy, in terms of quantum security, in terms of scalability? So that's how we think about our roadmap and how we structure it.
Fantastic. So number one is decentralization. Number two, mainstream adoption. Number three, tokenization and identity,
Use
and those
cases.
use cases
Yeah.
around that. And then the number four would be privacy, security, quantum resistance. Before we go down any of those rabbit holes, in the last 3-4 years, there's been such a huge influx of new L1s and L2s, and then everyone now talks about high DPS and low transaction charges and stuff. How do you compete? How do you get or win developers' mindshare against other, say, high TPS, low transaction cost L1s or L2s?
So if you think about this, like one, I think it's reliability, right? Like we've been around for 6 years. We have processed over 3 billion transactions. We have never been down a single second, right? So that is that reliability, that robustness is really important. The second thing I would say is specifically from a developer perspective, this chain has been built from the ground up to be as easy and as powerful as possible for developers to build on. And so not only do we have support for native Python and native TypeScript, but we have a number of features that are built into the protocol that you need smart contracts for on any other chain. And for instance, if you think about finality, again, built into the chain, you don't have to write complicated software to find out if a transaction that was initially approved actually was not being reverted 5 minutes later. Or we don't have to write any complex software to do that. Or multi-sig, like you don't need smart contracts for multi-sig. Even launching a code, like a token, you don't need a smart contract to launch a token. If you want the tokenization and you want to be compliant with all the regulation, all these compliant features are baked into the protocol. Whitelisting, blacklisting, freezing, clawback, all these things are native components of the protocol. And you as a developer don't have to worry about building smart contracts for any of these things. And so I would say specifically from a developer perspective, Algorand is the best chain to develop on because one, it's super easy because of language support. And secondly, you will be far more productive because you don't have to basically build a bunch of smart contracts. A lot of functionality is just built into the protocol.
Fantastic. We talked about these four key pillars that you're building your roadmap around. Out of these four, which one do you think will move the needle the most when it comes to mainstream adoption?
The pillar of mainstream adoption should move.
Yes.
Obviously,
Yeah.
the title of the pillar.
Even in that, there is quite a few things. Do you still feel like we need more apps? We need more dApps? Or there is one particular thing you feel like it's the RWAs?
So let me talk a little bit about the mainstream adoption pillar. We still have a mobile background. I used to work for Google and I worked on Android. I was the head of marketing for Android. And so remember the early days of smartphones prior to the arrival of the iPhone, right? Like you had a Nokia smartphone, right?
To use the Windows Phone. I don't know if you remember, it used to slide and it had a full keyboard underneath. I used that. And yes.
And so when you had a Windows smartphone before iPhone, or you had like a Nokia smartphone,
Yeah.
you wanted to go online, you had to do stuff. You were not online all the time. You had to just go into settings, you had to connect to a web gateway, and then you had to push a connect button, and then it would connect to the internet. And then, So there was a bunch of stuff you had to do to just go
Yes.
online. You were not automatically online. It feels to me like from the crypto industry is still in that phase. If you want to just do payment transactions or you send money from one person to another one, there's still a bunch of complexity that you still have to navigate as a user. Like all of the wallets that exist in crypto, they're still very complex for non-techie users to use. You still have to back up your seed phrases. If you want to send 5 USDC from one account to the other, you have to pay gas fees. What are gas fees? If you're a regular non-techie user, the idea you have to pay gas fees to send USDC from one to the other is like, what are we like? What's happening? People
Yes.
don't understand this, right? And so I think all of this complexity is still there. And I think if we really want to have a chance to actually onboard the next billion users, we have to get rid of all of these friction points. And so one of the elements in our roadmap, for instance, is we're going to fundamentally rethink what a wallet should be for a non-techie user. It means logging in with passkeys. It means not having to worry about seed phrases. And for instance, we're a member of the DREC Alliance. That means you can use social mechanisms to recover your seed phrases, right? So you can never lose your seed phrases. You need to do fee abstractions so that you never have to pay something in algos. You could have the wallet provider pay on your behalf. And on top of that, we've basically put identity at the core of this wallet experience. It becomes your mobile passport with you with a verifiable credentials associated with it. So it unlocks a bunch of new use cases, but in a way that a non-techie user will be able to use. So that's just one element of our roadmap, is like fundamentally rethinking what a wallet is and making it accessible for non-techie users.
I was about to ask you on that side of things. That's what I was driving towards, because how do you balance removal of seed phrases and UX simplicity while having true self custody, or having still having decentralization? Because it's always
Yeah.
been like a balance.
It's a very good question. And so the way we look at this wallet is it's completely self-custody. So there's no central servers whatsoever. There's no centralized elements. Even the way this wallet will connect to dApps is decentralized. And so this is a big step. I don't think anybody has this right now. If you think about this,
Mhm.
today, the way a wallet connects to an app is using something called Wallet Connect.
Yeah.
Wallet Connect is completely centralized. Wallet Connect can blacklist you anytime. They blacklisted a bunch of people from Russia when Russia was invading Ukraine. And so it's a centralized organization, and it's sitting at the center of how apps and wallets connect. That's not right. So our wallet was actually using a feature which we call Liquid Auth, which is a decentralized way using open standards for apps and wallets to connect. So it's a completely decentralized solution, but without any of the complexity associated with it. And as I mentioned with DREC, for instance, DREC is a mechanism by which you can actually recover your private keys by sharing versions of it or portions of it with your friends. And so it's using a social mechanism to
Yeah.
spread out fractions of your seed phrase and then get it of your private key, I should say, and then reconstitute it on request if you happen to lose your phone or whatever. But it's completely decentralized as well. So there's no central kind of mechanism behind it. So it's completely self-custody.
You are head of strategy and marketing at, and this is concept from even the web 2 days. Most startups have something called a North Star that they track, whether it's Airbnb tracking the number of nights people are booking or whatever. Some have revenue, some have daily active users, some have cost of acquisition. What's Algorand's North Star? What do you guys track or believe that is the most important thing to track when it comes to growth and marketing and all those type of things?
Yeah, I don't think we have necessarily one number that we track. As an ecosystem, there's multiple things that have to move
Mhm.
forward in parallel for you to be really thrive. And of course, one key thing that we track is basically adoption metrics, right? How are developers doing? Are we managing to attract new developers that build new stuff? And the same thing from a user perspective, how is user growth going? And then the third metric is really all a metric around businesses, like how are businesses finding Algorand and using Algorand, and what kind of transaction volume do they generate? What's the activity level on chain? So these are some of the metrics. So it's all kind of growth related metrics, right? It's users, developers, it's transactions, it's number of businesses and stuff like that.
And in the last 1.5 year, what's been the most effective marketing effort that you have done, or something that gave you above expected returns when it came to growth and marketing?
Yeah, we launched a big campaign last year called Can a Blockchain Do That? You can actually still check it out, canablockchaindothat.com. And it was all around creating a broader awareness for Algorand, refreshing people's idea of what Algorand is and what we do, but also educational in terms of explaining to businesses what a blockchain can do. And we're not the type of people that say that the blockchain can do everything and solve all known problems. That's not the case. A blockchain is good in particular use cases, but maybe not in others. And so the idea behind can a blockchain do that was really to explain, to educate, and to showcase the type of projects that a blockchain can and particularly tackle aggressively. And so that was a really good campaign for us. It worked extremely well, created broad awareness. Our CMC ranking went up from 70 to 40 or something like that. We saw progress across the board with that. And so that was one campaign. That is now feeding into a number of other initiatives, specifically around developer acquisition. And then later this year, we are planning a specific user acquisition campaign, which I'm very excited about.
That's very exciting. I'm sure you live in Bay Area, which is like center for all things AI happening in the world. And there has been so much hype, noise, and excitement around AI. And I was just reading about Pocket 4.0 as well as LLM integration. Can you please share about what that brings to Algorand and how can someone use it or what are the benefits?
We're very bullish on the integration between AI and blockchain. And so we just finished actually a hackathon
Yeah.
with Bolt. And Bolt is one of these vibe coding
Yes.
platforms that allows you to develop a full stack app by
Mhm.
just prompting. And we were their blockchain partner. And so we managed for them the blockchain track. And it was super interesting to see what happened. And we talked a lot about like, how do you attract developers from outside the crypto ecosystem? Like the way, you really drive for mass adoption is you have to reach beyond our own industry, right? Like everybody is always trying to steal users and developers from each other. But yeah, it's like the whole crypto ecosystem has 40,000 active developers, but
Yeah.
there's 10 million Python developers out there. There's 20 million or more TypeScript developers.
Yeah.
Right? And so the interesting with Bolt was that they were not targeting crypto developers. They were
Amazing.
targeting vibe coders and mainstream coders. And so we were able to show the value of Algorand and blockchains in general to this whole new audience. And we saw some really cool apps being developed with beautiful front ends, all vibe coded with smart contracts in the back end. And to me, this is where it's going to go. Is like with AI, it's going to become a really important tool to create innovative new apps or dApps and actually bring down the barriers to development. Because it's still quite complicated to develop a smart contract, even though you have Python and whatever. Developing smart contracts is still a complicated affair to the extent that LLMs can help and assist and co-pilot if
But
you
it's
want.
so dangerous, so dangerous. But
But
your
hey,
money in most cases,
you-
or property, or a digital asset of some form.
I tell my head of DevRel, oh, my dream is to be able to write code to smart contract. He pulls his hair out. He says, no, never.
You're using it to write a tweet or write a LinkedIn post. It can be high risk, but in most cases, it's very low risk. Whereas this has instant, immediate implications.
I think you're right. I think in a foreseeable future, you probably won't be able to completely vibe code a smart contract. But I think you can probably get 30, 40, 50% of the way there. You can
Yes.
develop a proof of concept, right? You can actually show this beautiful interface of what your app will do.
Mhm.
And so you can actually get some product market fit.
You could do
Show
an MVP really fast.
And so that will significantly speed up development. But you're right. Maybe in the first instance, the LLM will be your partner on the side who can make suggestions and help. But ultimately, you still need the coder to actually develop a proper smart contract. I agree with you on that. I don't know for how long that's going to be the case, but for the time being, I think that's the first part. And so part of AlgoKit 4.0 is really bringing in more of these kind of AI features into the development cycle, making sure that all the LLMs are properly trained on our architecture and our APIs and everything so that they can basically help you build the integration with Algorand. So that's one part of the AI approach. And the second part is around commerce. We really believe that the combination of blockchain and AI, specifically for payments, is an incredibly interesting and exciting area. As you can have more and more agents that are running around, and agents will talk to other agents and they will exchange value. And then how do they pay each other? They're not going to send each other a wire transfer. It's going to be too slow and too costly. So a blockchain is a perfect payment rail for these agents to agent transactions. And this is also part of our roadmap, is like figuring out the right frameworks to enable developers to build these payment flows on chain. And so I think that's a very promising area as well.
Fantastic. I have so many questions. If you could remove one thing from like blockchain culture to drive adoption, what would it be?
Rugging. No more rugging.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
I think we get a bad reputation as an industry
Ye-
with all of that. And I think you don't want that. And I think blockchain has so much opportunity and so much potential, but the rugging destroys it for everyone. So if I had to remove one thing, it would be that.
Yep. And I still feel there is a lot we can learn from the established traditional tech industry. And there are trillion-dollar tech companies out there. They have built mass adoption. They have got billions of users. And they also had to start in 2005, 6, 7, in that era. 1% of all commerce was on e-commerce in 2007. They had to start from scratch as well. So there's a lot I feel like we can learn. And you are someone who I respect because you have worked in that industry. You have worked for the likes of Google, Android, all those who have reached that mass adoption, who have crossed that billion plus user adoption. Is there any key lesson that you have learned or anything that you feel like we can learn from the traditional tech industry?
There's many things here, but if I had to pick one, and it's something that was very much also a key focus when I was at Google, is the idea of user first. And it sounds obvious, right? But it is a fundamentally important concept. And user first also means that you keep iterating, right? And you keep iterating fast until you find a product market fit. And so I remember when I was at Google, we were religious about this. We would launch a feature in Gmail in the morning. We would test user reaction and acceptance over the next couple of hours. We would basically see issues here and there pop up. We would focus on fixing those issues in the afternoon, and the next morning we would have a new release. So there would be turnaround based on user feedback of 24 hours. And so this super, super fast iteration is incredibly important. And so this mentality of putting the user first and making sure that whatever you do, and whatever you develop, whatever you create is the user in mind as first principle, I think is so important. And across the crypto landscape, we have a lot of very smart engineers, but they operate from their own mindset. And so you smart engineers will create like very powerful products that are very complex, that have tons of features that make it very hard for a regular user that is not as smart as those engineers to actually use. And that's what we have to overcome. We have to move to the user first culture where we iterate fast and put the user at the center of everything.
That was on the Web2 traditional tech industry side. What about on the Web3 crypto side and blockchain side of things? Is there any competitor or any other startup or company that you really respect in this space, and why?
I think if you look at Circle, for instance, if I
Yes.
had to name one, I think Circle has done incredibly well. And I think they have been at it for a long time and they kept at it. They really believed in the promise of stablecoins. They
Yes.
really believed in doing it in a compliant way that takes into account regulations, even though there were a lack of regulations, but they
Yes.
always tried to be on the right side of the industry. And I really respect them for that. They helped make stablecoins a really big force in the industry. And so it's also partially thanks to them that we have regulation now in the US that really regulates stablecoins. And I think it's a great company.
Fantastic. What would you say is the biggest misconception people have about Algorand?
The biggest misconception that people have, I don't think it's necessarily a misconception. I think that a lot of people are just not aware of the vibrancy of our ecosystem, right? And of
Yep.
all the things that they can do, right? And so specifically if you think about DeFi, for instance, right? Like what people don't know, I'm not sure it's a misconception, but what people don't know is how good our DeFi ecosystem is and how smooth the experience is. We talk about user first and user experience, right? We can talk all we want about all the technical marvels of like instant finality and the speed and scalability or whatever it is. But what that results in from a user perspective is quite awesome. So if people start trading on Algorand and they lend, they borrow, they swap, whatever, they'll see all of these transactions go through in an instant, right? They will never fail. They will pay very low fees. They never have to wait. we have these really powerful routers that allow you to find the best path by combining different swaps and different pools and everything. And it does it all in an instant, and it never fails. And you never end up with an intermediate token because leg number one went through and leg two didn't go through. So none of that stuff exists. And so the DeFi experience in Algorand is like a Web2 experience. It's super smooth. And people don't know this. People haven't tried this. And I would really encourage your listeners, if you want to see what superior DeFi looks like, to download the Para wallet and try it out. Go to Tinyman, go to Folks, participate in our liquid staking, get staking rewards, and try it out. It's super, super smooth.
Fantastic. I have just maybe 2 or 3 more questions. And that next one is about being quantum safe. And this is a multi-part question. First of all, do you believe we will have some form of a Q day, or when quantum computing breaks all encryption, whether it's Bitcoin encryption or multiple other encryptions in the crypto space, whether that will happen? And if it's going to happen, then how far are we from it? And what's Algorand doing in this space? Because I have read about things that Algorand is trying to make more quantum safe, or with the Falcon based state proofs and things like that. So if you can touch a little bit on that as well.
Yeah. Oh, Q Day will happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it will happen.
Thought you would
It
have
will
a
happen.
crystal ball that you would be able to have a look and tell me
It
the
will
exact
happen for
date.
sure. The key question is what's going to happen first, AGI or Q Day? That I don't know. Like, you want to bet on that? Which going to happen first?
I
AGI
okay,
or
I
Q
I
Day?
I think we are closer to a breakthrough in computing before we are to AGI, and quantum computing would probably lead to AGI.
Yeah, interesting. NIS announced that nobody should use elliptical cryptography after 2030. That is only 5 years away. That's
I
like,
know.
it's only 5 years away. And so we've been worried about this for a long time. And so we've been investing in making our chain quantum secure for quite a while. And so we have this thing, as you mentioned, we have this thing called state proofs that is using Falcon signatures, which are quantum secure cryptography. And what that does is it protects the ledger. So it protects all the transactions that have been submitted on chain. So even if a quantum computer arrives tomorrow and starts breaking the transactions and start breaking consensus or whatever it is, they will never be able to break the historical transactions that have been recorded on the Algorand blockchain. And that's very important, because if you're a big institution, and because if you think about countries, for instance, right, they have time spans that are longer than our time spans. We think a couple of years ahead, 5 years ahead. They think ahead 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. And so if you just say you tokenize treasuries on chain, you don't want those treasuries to suddenly break at some point in the future, 20, 30 years from now. And so they have a completely different time span in mind. So for them, the fact that our ledger is quantum secure today, I think, is a very important feature. So that's the one thing. We have that. We can check we have that piece. But there's other pieces that are not yet quantum secure. So for instance, our accounts are not quantum secure, and our consensus mechanism is not quantum secure. So as part of our roadmap, we are going to quantum secure accounts. And so that's the next step. And so this is something that we'll implement probably in the next year or so. And so we'll have accounts quantum secure. And then the next step after that will be consensus mechanism.
Fantastic. And if you like, I love you guys' roadmap, especially the 4 pillars that your roadmap is built upon. In order to achieve that, do you guys have a ask? Are you guys looking at hiring? Are you guys looking at giving out more grants to attract people that they should check out? Are you guys running hackathon? Anything? Feel free to share.
Yeah, this is a very important point, right? I
Yes.
think there's something strange about releasing a roadmap in a decentralized environment, right? It feels like centralized, right? If somebody comes up with a roadmap, okay, but
Yes.
and so the way we're thinking about this is that the roadmap, the North Star, is where we're driving towards, right?
Yes.
We believe in OG values, we believe in mainstream adoption, and we have work streams underneath it. We believe
Yes.
in tokenization and some of these use cases and in the research piece. But the implementation of this, I can tell you, we had like lots of conversations with lots of OGs in the ecosystem to talk about this in more detail to make sure we all feel good about like where we're headed. And there's 2 things I want to say about this. One is, if you look at our roadmap and you compare it with the roadmaps of many other chains, you'll see that ours is very different. And in my view, actually, you can look at a roadmap and tell whether that chain is mature or not. If the roadmap is still focused on figuring out how to scale, or figuring out how to do instant finality, or figuring out all these basic stuffs, that means that chain is really not ready for kind of mass adoption because it's still trying to figure out the basic infrastructure. When you look at our roadmap, it is focused a layer higher. It is focused on like, how do you get to mass adoption? How do you make it life easier for developers, for users, for businesses, right? And so
For
a
agents,
lot of
for
the
AI.
roadmap is focusing on the enabling pieces that will drive mass adoption as opposed to fixing. So that's one thing I want to say. The second thing, in terms of implementation of this roadmap, this is really designed to be joint effort with our ecosystem. And so we have this new governance system, which we call XGov, that is actually providing grants. And these grants are voted by the community, not by us. So the decision makers are basically the stakers on a network. They can vote on who gets a grant and who not. And so as part of this whole XGov process, we will actually request collaboration from parties in our ecosystem to contribute to this roadmap and implement pieces of it. And so give you one concrete example. If you think about the agentic commerce piece, like a big part of that is a feature called MCP. And MCP is this protocol that enables the integration of an LLM with, in our particular case, with a blockchain. So all the MCP functionality was built by a company in our ecosystem, Go Plausible. It was not built by us. But they're still part of the roadmap because it's still strategically very important that we move in that direction. But the implementation of it was actually done by one of the protocols in our network. And so we will do much more of that. And you'll see a lot more collaboration happening between our projects to actually deliver on this roadmap.
Great to hear. And are you also incentivizing more people to come and build by giving out grants or having funds and things like that?
Yep. As I said, we just completed this big hackathon with Bolt. So early September, we have 4 hackathons happening roughly at the same time. We have one happening in Boston, we have one in Turkey, we have one in India, and we have one in
Singapore. Is it Singapore? Because 2049 in Singapore around in September, end of September.
So we have 4 hackathons that are happening roughly in early September in various partnerships. And then we basically have, following that, the developers that actually go through this, the next step is they will be led into our accelerator programs and then into our incubator programs. And there's funding all along the way. There's funding for the hackathons, there's grants, there's prizes to be won. Then that participate in the accelerator, there's financial help there. Then it goes into the incubator program. And ultimately, we want these startups to be VC funded as well. So there's a whole kind of funnel that we go through to help developers and the developers with bright ideas to help them succeed, also as businesses on chain.
Fantastic. Some ecosystems that I have talked with, whether it's Solana or Stellar or a few others like in this space, they do something once a year, like a big conference event, and where all these startups come and pitch like YC demo data style thing. Do you also guys do that? And if you do, then when is it?
Yeah, every 2 years we do a big event we call Decipher. And so the last time we did was in Barcelona, and then before that it was Dubai, and then before that I think it was Miami. It was before my time. And so the next one is coming up next year, but we haven't announced anything on this. We haven't announced exact time or location or anything, but yes, the plan is to run another big one sometime next year.
Awesome. I would love to cover that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the links to all these things that you talked about, including the roadmap and how people can collaborate, can join, can learn, can partner with Algorand. So people can find you guys. And it's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you, Marc. Thank you so much for your time and keep in touch.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, would love to cover the Cypher in person, and let's keep in touch. Looking forward to it.
Yes, absolutely. So
In
we'll
the
stay
loop.
in touch on the details of when that event is going to happen. It's going to be magical. I can tell you already.
Awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening or watching this episode of the Web3 with Sam Kamani podcast. By now, you know the drill. Leave a comment or share this episode with a friend and leave a review. I would love to hear from you. So that's why my DMs are open. Reach out to me, especially if you are a founder building a product in Web3. Then I would love to hear from you. What are your challenges? Is there anything that I can help you or my community can help you with? Thank you once again and wish you best of luck in building your startup or your project.